Welcome to session 5 of the series Startup with John Houston. He's been sharing with us what he believes are the 7 tips or the 7 building blocks for starting up a business from scratch. And John's had lots of experience doing that. This week we have a special guest with us. It's Chad Miles, our CFO, and we're very excited to have him on the call with us. John and Chad, how are y'all doing?
Doing good.
Awesome. Well, John, we've talked a lot already with our listeners about how to hear the voice of the Lord, how to seek out the purpose of the business. And then Terry Travick talked with us about how to put that business plan in place and get your house in order, all of that great stuff. We've got our CFO on, so that's a good hint for some of our people on what our next tip is. But John, go ahead and share with everybody, what is tip number 5?
Tip number 5 is tailor the business. So let me explain that to you. So basically, we've kind of gone through this whole process. So that one of the next things is you've got to have that legal, finance, financial, accounting, all those pieces put in place. And let me tell you, if you're like me, you need a Chad on your team, or you need a Chad that at least you can get to talk to help you actually go in the right direction, because that's not my expertise. And so that's why I'm excited about talking about tip number 5, tailor the business.
Yes. So Chad, thanks for being on this call with us. I know that you actually get asked a lot of times by people, how do I structure the business? Where do I start? And so can you just share some of that with our listeners?
Yeah, we do get an opportunity to talk to a lot of future business owners, and this is absolutely the number one question: is what type of legal structure should I choose? And it's an important decision. It affects how you're taxed. It's the type of flexibility that you're going to have within your business, and the decision can feel intimidating, but it doesn't need to be. There's several types of business structures, and they each have their own little nuances. So I'll take a couple minutes to just walk through a few of them. So let's jump right in. The most common business structure is a sole proprietorship. These are very easy to form, and in most cases, there's nothing that you need to file. The structure offers complete managerial control. But the downside is that the owner is personally liable for the financial obligations of the company. Another common business structure is a partnership. Partnership involves 2 or more people, and the partnership itself, it doesn't bear any tax burdens, the entity itself. The profits and the losses are what we call pass-through. They're pass-through entities, and that means that the profits and the losses of the business are passed to the partners, and it will be shown on their individual tax returns. But a disadvantage to a partnership is that the partners can also be personally liable for the financial obligations, just like with a sole proprietorship. So that brings us to the third type of company we're going to talk about, and that's a limited liability company, or an LLC. It's also a pass-through entity like a partnership. But what's great about an LLC is that it actually shields the owner from personal liability. And that's a big deal, especially when you're in an industry that takes on a little more risk. You will need to register your company with the state to be able to form an LLC. In regards to these 3 entities, they all have one thing in common too, is that they're subject to what we call a self-employment tax, and so that can hit you if you're paying yourself a salary in those 3 companies. So that leads us to the 4th type of company that we're going to talk about, and that's a corporation or a C corp. This legal entity is it separates the ownership. It separates the liability from the owners. It pays its own taxes, but it provides the strongest protection to the owner's personal liability. But this formation typically costs a little bit more to structure, and it can require some better record keeping. And then there's this double taxation risk that they talk about if the owner plans on making dividends from the company, they could pay the tax on that amount twice. There's some other business structures as well, but these are really the most common four. And I can see how this could feel overwhelming if if this isn't an arena that you're used to, but the good news is that there's a lot of sources out there of good information to help you make a really good informed decision. One of those is the SBA, or the Small Business Administration. They have a really useful website that can really walk you through the process. And so I'd recommend you visiting their site if this is something that you're wanting to do. And then also, you can always change structures if you feel like you made the wrong decision. And in most cases, you can do that with very little restrictions.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Chad. And I think what might be great is we can share that link in this post so that people have a place to go to.
Sure.
Because if you're not a CPA like myself or John, you probably are shaking your head going, oh my goodness, where do I even start? But John, you didn't have a Chad when you first started, John Houston Custom Homes. So talk to us about what was that like for you, and what are some lessons you learned in the process that you could save everyone else who's starting?
Yeah, I think for me, you're right. I didn't have a Chad back then, but for me, one of the biggest mistakes that I made was I really didn't do enough homework on, for example, my CPA. I didn't really do the homework on the CPA to know, was this CPA actually an expert in home building? And let me tell you why that's a big deal, is because what ended up happening was, as we grew and as we got to a certain size, they didn't actually know all the tax laws and the tax things that I needed to know in order to fulfill my obligations to the government. So I ended up having a big back tax with penalties and interest that I ended up having to pay. So I really encourage you, whether it's legal, whether it's financial, whether it's the type of corporation you're setting up, make sure for whatever business you're setting up, whatever business type that is, make sure those people that you're working with are actually people that really know those type of businesses, because that's a really key component to making this successful.
Yeah, what a great tip to hear from you, John. Well, thank you, Chad, and thank you, John. And I hope this has been beneficial for everybody who's been listening. Tip number 5 is tailor the business. And this is an area where you definitely want to do your homework and research because it can make all the difference for your business. We hope you guys have a blessed week.
Have a good day.